Condemnation continues to trail the shooting of Omoyele Sowore by the Nigerian police force. Questions are being raised. Let us get straight to this. From your perspective, was Sowore specifically targeted, and was this shooting linked to his activism, especially with his vitriolic and bitter criticism of this government? What's your reaction, sir?
Well, I haven't been able to speak with Sowore because of the condition in which he was, and up to this time, although I'm happy to hear that he's getting stabilized, I haven't spoken with him to hear directly from him. But it would be expected that government would not be happy about his consistency in campaigning for good governance and for calling on this government to resign. But I didn't expect that they would go to the extreme, level of making an attempt on his life. I'm shocked, to say the least. But I'm happy that Sowore is still alive.
Now let's ask you, under international standard, it is expected, especially on the use of basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials. It's been said that intentional lethal use of firearms may only be made when strictly unavoidable to protect life. Was there any basis for the officer to have shot at Sowore this morning?
The Constitution of Nigeria, the 1999 Constitution, flawed as it is, still protects the basic freedoms to expression, movement, and assembly. And peaceful assembly is guaranteed under the law. And the police are guided by a certain code of conduct and rules of engagement, which includes proportionality in the use of force and firearms. Now, the principles include principles of necessity, proportionality, legality, and accountability. Was it necessary to have shot Sowore? Sowore was not bearing arms. He didn't pose any threat to any of the law enforcement officers or to anybody within that environment. So there was no necessity, there was no justification for that use of, it is a case of unnecessary use of force, an abuse of firearms. And I think that what that officer has done is to commit a crime. He has violated Sowore's right to freedom of expression and has also made an attempt on his life. By now, I was expecting that she ought to have been arrested for that crime and for that violation. My organization, RULAC, has already called on the Police Service Commission because the officer involved is a senior officer. And I'm shocked that actually that this was coming from a senior officer. So we expect that the police, I'm not expecting so much from the Inspector General of Police, whose directive, by the way, has encouraged this reckless action. The Inspector General of Police has asked police officers to act without regard to the rules of engagement, that they should not bother about media shouts about human rights violation. And that is what has given the impetus for this officer to behave the way she has behaved. So we have asked the Police Service Commission, which is the external oversight body, to initiate a process, a disciplinary process to ensure that she's brought to account.
One begins to wonder whether this action by this officer actually provides evidence that the shooting of protesters was not just mere accidents, but as a result of a deliberate policy by senior figures within the Buhari's regime to use deadly force in order to disperse protesters. What's your view on this?
If you look at the history of police violence in Nigeria, you will agree with me that there are only few cases that can qualify as what the police will usually describe as accidental discharge. Most of the cases of abuse and misuse of firearms were deliberate acts of shooting at people to suppress them, to repress their rights. If you look at what has happened to certain groups in this country, take the case of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, the Sheikh Zaki group, which is a group that does not bear arms. If you look at what is happening in Sowore, Imo State today, where police will go into public places and begin to open fire. They are shooting indiscriminately to kill. So anybody who tries to twist the story around what happened today will be telling lies. There was an attempt, it was a deliberate, misuse of firearms for which the officer responsible should be held to account.
Well, this government has actually assigned the Unity Fountain as a place for peaceful protest. And one begins to wonder, why will this government resort to locking the place off and, and more or less violating the rights of Nigerians to protest?
You know that when a government when a government has failed, when a government is incompetent, it becomes paranoid. When a government is disconnected from the people, when it has lost the confidence of the people, when the people consider it to be a failed government, it becomes paranoid. Every peaceful assembly becomes an attempt to overthrow the government. Look at what happened in Sowore, Imo State. Over 107 people in the kangaroo trial on the allegation that they were plotting to overthrow Buhari and the governor of Imo State. Look at such a preposterous, action. So it's a government that, as citizens do, becomes an attempt to, to overthrow it. So it begins to shrink the civic space, as you can see. It shows you that it's a failed government that has become paranoid and repressive.
Finally, let's just quickly round this up. What concrete steps should be taken now to reverse this impunity for these kinds of violations and misconduct by law enforcement agents?
Unfortunately, there is no government. We know that the misconduct that we are seeing going on among law enforcement agencies, abuse of firearms, extrajudicial killings, is a direct order by the president, who has asked them to shoot at sight. And the Inspector General of Police has decided to implement that order by asking police officers to shoot at sight. So what that means is that the government has declared war on the people. And so the people have to fight back. And that is why I agree with Sowore when he says Buhari must go. And for me, that is the only way. Nigerians must rise to demand that Buhari must go, really, because he has outlived his usefulness as a president.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nwagumma. We really appreciate your insight as far as these issues are concerned.